Welcome to Coastal Voices, the show that brings you stories about life on Hatteras Island. This is Susan West, your host for the evening. The stories you'll hear tonight capture the spirit of people from Rodanthe to Hatteras Village. The storytellers come from all walks of life, and topics include everything from childhood memories to fish tales, community traditions to big storms, hard work to daring adventures. The stories are from recordings collected by local volunteers in the Coastal Voices Oral History Project. You'll meet some of those volunteers in the show tonight. To learn more about the project, please visit our website at carolinacoastalvoices.com. Chubby Doris of Frisco describes the section of Hatteras Village called Sticky Bottom. Mr. Doris was interviewed in 2002 by Jennifer Miller for the Cape Hatteras National Seashore Ethnohistory Project. The Outer Banks Community Foundation provided funds to digitize the original recording.
You were just telling me about the Sticky Bottom down Hatteras Village. And that was
from the old post office, where Midget Realty has the pink storage building, I think it is now. That was where the old post office was. And the highway, when the highway come in on the island, it stopped right there at the old post office in that general area.
Mm-hmm.
And from there on down, there was no paved road. Naturally, there was low land down there, still is, really. And they got the nickname of Sticky Bottom. In the wintertime especially, it was always, the ruts in the road were always covered with water, and there was always water down in that area.
Uh-huh.
So they called it Sticky Bottom. The old timers always had some kind of name for everything.
Right.
And everybody. I acquired the nickname of Chubby from my grandfather. My grandfather, Ramsey Gaskins. He was sort of one of the many town comedians that always joked and carried on and stuff like that. And when I was a baby, I was just a hefty baby, still hefty man, but he nicknamed me Chubby. And Chubby had been what I've been called all of my life. You could come ask for Douglas Doris and they'd send you to my son.
In an interview with Liz Browning Fox in March 2013, Calvin Dallas Burris Jr. remembered his Aunt Mat, asthma, and medical marijuana.
She was very ill with asthma, so I'd go see her, and then she had this can there called Fizzy. It was in a red can, I can see it right now, and it had a recessed top in it. And she'd take that, put her a spoonful of it in there, and light it with a match, and it would fizz and smoke, and she'd inhale it, and it would relax her asthma when she had asthma. And so, and they called it Fizzy.
You have any idea what was in it?
Yes, I do.
I
found out years ago, years later. I mean, this was years when marijuana got popular, you know.
He started smoking marijuana.
No, I didn't. I didn't smoke none of it, but I smelled it.
Yeah.
I said, "What are you smoking?" One guy was smoking it one day. He said, "It's marijuana." And it was the same stuff that was in that can. She would inhale that, and it would relax her. She'd go to sleep. She could breathe pretty good. But I had asthma too when I was young. Bad. I've had shots and everything else with it. I went to sea on a light ship for 3 years. Never had it no more. But before I went to sea, I found out sometimes I'd get up with asthma bad, could hardly breathe. I'd go down to the ocean and start breathing that salt air, and it would relieve me. But when I went to sea after that, I haven't had it since.
What light ship were you on?
Chesapeake light ship.
Lucy Stowe of Hatteras explains how she became a weather observer at the Hatteras Weather Bureau. Amy Glass interviewed Ms. Stowe in 1988 for the Southern Oral History program. The Outer Banks Community Foundation provided funds to digitize the original recording.
World War II was just getting underway. Well, I came back in 42. It was getting underway, and I saw an application. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but they needed some weather observers, and they had a training school of 6 weeks in Atlanta, Georgia. It was with civil service, of course. I thought that might be nice to go to Atlanta, Georgia, and see what that was like. So I sent in an application, and then I had to take a civil service examination, pass that. But instead of getting to Atlanta, Georgia, they put me right on the weather station here at Hatteras. Gave me about a week's training, said you're a weather observer. So I haven't been to Atlanta yet, only to fly through the airport, go in, change planes, and take off again. But that was the way I ended up working for the Weather Service. I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I thought it would be good to go to Atlanta. And it was interesting work, so I stuck with it.
What was the training week like? Who trained you?
Well, one that was working at the time, and I think they said this is a thermometer, and that's a barometer, and this is a barograph, and you read them every hour. It was very simple then, and I was lucky. The next year we put in something they called pilot balloons. That was releasing helium-filled balloons and tracking it with a theodolite and getting the wind direction and velocity aloft. And then maybe the next year they put in radio sondes. That was you sent a radio instrument up on a balloon. But each thing they added, I sort of grew along with it and learned as we were getting it. Because in the early 40s, reporting weather was still rather primitive. So I was in right about at the time it started changing. And then after World War II, when radar, that is really what changed the ways of reporting weather. That was a big jump forward.
Were there many women in the weather service at that time?
I didn't know it at the time, but there were none until the war started and most of the men were gone, and then they took a few in. And then after the war, most of them got out. There were a few of us left. 2 up in Norfolk stayed in, and 1 or 2 down in Charleston. But for the most part, a lot of them went on back. I guess they married or moved on to something else. But now there's more and more women getting in it.
L.P. O'Neill of Avon talks about his father and mother's seafaring careers and about their boats. Mr. O'Neill was interviewed in 2004 by Barbara Garrity Blake for the Cape Hatteras National Seashore Ethnohistory Project. The Outer Banks Community Foundation provided funds to digitize the original recording.
Him and my mother used to run these, they call them ore barges or whatever. They ran ore from either Baltimore or Norfolk. And they had a tug that towed this barge. It was just like a big house, you know. And my father was captain on it after he got out of the Navy. And, after he got out of the Navy, he come home and married my mother in 1921. And she went to sea with him. And his father went as a helper, too. His name was George Howard, my grandfather.
She went to sea with him?
Yes.
Isn't that unusual?
No, not in them days. And my uncle, his brother, done the same thing. He carried his wife with him, too, and boys.
And how many days at a time would they be out there?
Well, whatever it was, how long it took to tow them up there. It took a long time, maybe 6, 8 days to go to Bangor, Maine.
Bangor, Maine is where they went?
Yeah.
Now, what was your mother's name?
Ida.
Ida?
Ida Mae O'Neill.
And was she from Avon, too?
Yes, sir. She was born right here at Avon.
So as a young woman, there she is working on this barge with your father.
Yeah, she cooked. They had a crew over there, about 6 or 7, besides my father and his father.
Wow.
And she cooked. She got paid. My grandfather, he got paid. There was nothing right here. And he saved up enough money, and after that, and my mother wanted to move home with Teresa,
Who was Teresa?
my sister.
Okay, was that the oldest daughter?
Yeah, she was older. She's 10 years older than me. She was 10 years. She was born in 24, and I was born in 34.
Wow. And so as a baby, she was carried out on this barge?
Yes. My mother come home in December, and she was born in January, And in June, she went back. She went to sea when went back to sea. 3 years later, when it was all over with, my father come down here and he bought the Missouri off this Mr. Charlie Williams, which was Mr. Charlie Williams was the first legislature from North Carolina from this island.
Really?
He had the post office down here on the shore. It took 5 days to get to Raleigh.
Huh.
He'd have to sail from here to Swan Quarter.
But now, what boat did your father buy from Charlie Williams?
The Missouri, that was her name.
And that was the one that was built in
Smyrna, North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Yeah. 1901.
1901.
Yeah, 56 feet and had a 19-foot beam. And my father ran freight. He had a Coca-Cola franchise. He used to, in other words, he had the only Cokes down here on the island. And
that was probably when Coke first started being put on the market?
Well, they actually they called them dopes back in them days. You know,
They call them what?
Dopes.
Dopes?
Coca-Cola, yeah. You know, Coca-Cola had cocaine in it up until 1937.
Oh my gosh.
You didn't know that,
I
did
did know that.
Did
I
you?
did know that, but I didn't know they called them dopes.
Yeah, well, they called them dopes here, sure. We used to have a great big garage out there, like a warehouse, and it was always stacked up full of drinks and things like that, you know. He'd haul freight, tombstones, lumber, whatever anybody wanted, he'd haul it.
Mm-hmm. And he had a regular, would he go regularly?
Once a week. Well, I'll tell you how much stuff cost. I got a book upstairs. This fella from Frisco, right?
Uh-huh.
He used to have a store named Eddie Williams.
Right.
This is just for instance. And my father bought a case of tomatoes down. It was either 24 or 48. I don't know what it was. Anyhow, the whole case of tomatoes cost $1.33, and he charged 10-cent freight from Elizabeth City and delivered it to Frisco. Well, they called it Trent in them days. And
How did he make any money?
Oh, the most money he ever made was he had government contracts during the Depression, hauling coal to these
really?
Coast Guard stations and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So what was his actual route from where to where?
Well, he'd leave here and go to Elizabeth City to pick up freight.
Okay.
And where he'd go, you know, he'd stop in Rodanthe.
Okay.
He'd go into Rodanthe, he'd drop off stuff. But the stuff that, unless he carried a lot of lumber, he'd go into Buxton or Hatteras, you know. Now, he never put engines in that boat until 1939.
Really? It was all sail until then?
All sail until 1939.
And then he converted it over? And what
Well,
kind
it didn't look any different, except that living quarters in the stern, you know, in the back where the little table was.
Right.
That was all out, and they put 2 engines down there.
And what kind of engines did they put in there?
2 straight 8 Buicks.
Buicks?
Buick engines, yeah.
You didn't have to crank them, did you?
I don't know if you did or not, tell you the truth, but I remember folks around here used to crank engines with a crank.
Right.
With their feet.
With their feet?
Yeah, they turned the key off and turn the engine over and get the crank up. Then they turn the key on and push the crank down. It was a dangerous thing. My father, he got slammed against the side of the engine cabin many a time.
By what?
The crank,
Oh,
with the engine to kick back in them days.
Oh, no.
He had a gouge right through his nose, like that's where this was a different type boat. Threw him against the side, inside the cabin. You know, they was used to hard work. I'm telling you, that little fella, the only thing that ever I felt bad about, and I think it hurt his feelings. He told me to carry a piece of line up and put it through the block. That was on the Missouri when I was just a little boy, 5 or 6. Mm-hmm. I should have been, you know, I'd swim all my life, you know, I should have been tough enough. I couldn't get up that mast.
Uh-huh.
He took his shoes off, got barefooted, put the line in his mouth. He went up that mast just like a monkey.
Oh,
Reeved it through the block and come back down.
And how tall was he?
5'5". He had arms that big around.
What did people call him?
Lauren.
They call him Lauren.
They call me LP.
LP.
For Lauren Pierce.
So they would say, here comes Lauren in the freight boat. And where did he keep the boat tied up?
Right
here?
off the shore down
Right
there.
here?
Yeah, right here. Or up to the Mill Creek. You know where the creek is up north of Avon?
Mm-hmm, yep.
Okay, where the restaurants and stuff is?
Right.
Right outside of it is an island out there called Big Island.
Right.
Used to anchor it back there.
Okay, and so he would haul anything.
Anything. If
Coats.
you wanted to build a house, he'd go over the Outfall Canal and up Alligator River and all them areas up there and get a load of lumber.
And bring it back here.
Yeah. Yep.
And would he deliver it as far down as Ocracoke?
I have no idea. I've
Yeah.
never heard him say he ever went to Ocracoke, but more likely he did.
Right.
But see, they had these boats to Hatteras, too, that run from Hatteras to Swan Quarter.
Oh, that's true, yeah. There were several freight boats, weren't there?
Yeah, there was, yeah.
Did he ever carry people?
Yes, yeah, he did. He always carried people going north and coming back.
Did he charge them?
No,
He didn't?
never charged a nickel. No.
He just let him ride.
Just let him ride. Going up, we'd have beef hash and corn fritters going up, and coming back, we'd have the same thing as beef hash. Now this is the watery kind, like with gravy.
Right.
And coming back, they put string beans and corn in it, so it was more like a soup, and still have cornbread. We go up. Here's what they usually did. It took one day going up, and then they'd load
To Elizabeth City.
and they'd tie up in Elizabeth City and load. They'd work it late at night to get her loaded, and then the next morning, everything was right. And we had a little donkey, but he had a little donkey boat on there with a little one-cylinder engine in it.
Right.
That was before the engines were put in. And a lot of times they tow it downriver till we got to the turning buoy outside Elizabeth City, past the Tank River. Till you got the turning buoy, and then you'd hoist the little boat up on the stern, and then you'd set the sails and sail down. Man, it was, for a kid my age, it was out of this world. You don't know how I dream about them. Every Christmas, my father had another boat. We had a cabin boat that we used to go to Long Shoal. You know where Long Shoal is? Just after Stumpy Point, right before you get to Englehart. It's called Long Shoal River. And my father used to take me over to hunting every Christmas when I was a boy. We'd anchor back at the island. He'd cook, you know. Oh, God, he could make the best biscuits you ever tasted.
Aw,
And he'd roast black ducks and stuff in there. We'd have oyster fritters.
Were you his only son?
Yeah, My sister was just like me. She was raised just like I was.
She would want to go too?
Oh, God, yes. You couldn't keep her out. No.
And so when he went to Elizabeth City, then he'd come back the next day?
If he could. Most time he did. It's if everything was ready, he'd probably come back the next day. But, sometimes
Did it ever depend on the tides and winds and stuff?
No, never did. Not with this boat. Not with the Missouri he did. But with the Duncan he did. With the Duncan, when he come down, he'd have to anchor down here by the Cape Channel until the tide got up.
What was the Duncan? Another freight boat?
She was a bug eye, yeah.
Oh, that was the bug eye?
Yeah, she was a freight boat, yeah.
Okay.
But she drawed a lot of water.
And where did he get the Duncan?
I have no idea. I've asked 40 people. Nobody knows where he got it.
And where are these boats now?
The Duncan is right out here. The Worms got her. And she wasn't worth fixing, so they towed her out to the edge of the channel.
Right.
Poured gas inside of her and set her on fire. And she burnt and sunk out there.
Right.
Now, I saw it with my fish finder.
Oh, really?
A friend of mine, we went looking for her. We saw that little rib sticking up out of the sand.
Wow, must be pretty deep where they sunk.
Yeah, it was 9-10 feet. So he had that boat, and we had that one called the LP Junior. I told you, he bought these two. He bought this boat and the LP Junior from Bradford, this commercial hunter. After he died, my father, he was offered to buy the house, land, and the two boats for $1,200. He only had $400, so he bought the boats. One was the boat that they used to live on. They go out to carry hunters out in, was called the Brant. She was 30 feet long. She was a motorboat, had a 3-cylinder Lathrop in it. And that's the one that throwed my father against the side of the cabin. And they used to go out and hunt. They had a stove in there. Had a wood stove,
Did your father take them hunting too?
Yeah, he did. That's what he did. He worked for Bradford. He used to take people out, yeah.
And who is Bradford?
He was a New York industrialist. They still got him up there. They're very, very rich people.
And he had a place down here?
Yeah, he got a club down here. Built a nice club here, yeah.
Oh, I heard about that. It was to the north here?
Right up to the north down that road. It's called, what's the name of that road? McMullen Road. McMullen was a district attorney for the state of North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
He bought this property off of Bradford.
And Bradford was the last name, Mr. Bradford?
Bradford. John Bradford was his name, yeah. He's the one that owned all this stuff.
And did your father do that while he was doing the freight boat, or afterwards?
No, he did that. Before, until he got the freight boat.
So you must have grown up really knowing how to handle boats.
I did all my life. All my life I've been in it.
And you can sail.
Yeah, well, I can sail. Yeah, I've sailed. Man, that little boat up there, I loved it to death.
And did people, how'd they take care of those boats? How'd they keep them from, did they paint them regularly?
Yeah,
they haul them out?
Copper paint, haul them out, put copper paint on them, My father, that was just like a toy. I'm telling you, he loved that boat.
And how often would he haul that boat out?
All the time, about once a month. He'd haul it out and scrub the bottom with sand on a rag.
And that would get all the algae off?
Yeah, sure. Get it off, let it dry, one little dent in it, and he'd have to paint it. My mother sat there. My mother was a very patient lady. In them days, I've heard certain people say that women were second-class citizens back in them days. No, they weren't second-class citizens. They was because they loved their family. Mm-hmm. You know, I went to church one time, and I heard this woman say that in Sunday school class. I got up and left. All I could see was my mother's red hands where she was washing me and my sister's clothes out there by hand on a washboard. My father used to send her to collect.
Collect the money?
Yes, sir.
How did she do that?
She didn't take no bull off of anybody. I'm telling you. He'd send her to collect the money from these stores up down the islands, you know.
And how would she get around?
One of his workers would carry her in a truck. My father had 2 4-ton Chevrolets. These only had single wheels. Didn't have double wheels because they won't pull in sand. They let the air way out of the tires, you know, so they flatten out like that. And he'd carry her around.
Bert Hooper of Salvo shares the names of tidal creeks in an interview with Barbara Garrity Blake. The interview was conducted in 2003 for the Cape Hatteras National Seashore Ethnohistory Project. The Outer Banks Community Foundation provided funds to digitize the original recording.
Let's see, some of the names of the tidal creeks and landings. There's one called Percy's Net Rack. Mm-hmm. Who was Percy? I mean, was that somebody had a net rack there?
He was a man that lived at Avon.
Uh-huh.
He cut everybody's hair years ago for $1 a head.
Really?
But he used to fish up around Goshen. He had a net rack. He put it there.
Ah.
And that's why they call it Percy's. Now, a lot of people call it a snake pit. There's a lot of snakes there in summertime.
Really?
That was Carnegie's Pond.
Carnegie's Pond?
Mm-hmm.
What was Carnegie from?
Well, it used to be a pond.
Uh-huh.
And it didn't open up in the sun, and they went there and drained it so they could get the turtles out of it.
Terrapin turtles?
Mm-hmm.
They drained it and then they marketed them?
Mm-hmm.
Who was Carnegie?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
And this was a Station Creek. There used to be a station out here. This is the Flag Creek.
Flag Creek.
Mm-hmm. And then it goes on up here on the way. And there's a point out there. This is called a man's grave.
Man's Creek?
Man's grave.
Man's grave?
Mm-hmm. They buried a man there several years ago. I think they named it a man's grave.
They buried a man, or it used to be a cemetery?
Man, yeah.
Just a
No.
man. Huh. What do you think the story is behind that?
Don't know.
Teresa Ray of Ocracoke tells us about fishing trips when everything didn't go exactly as planned. What is like the fishing trip from hell?
Oh.
You know, what is the worst stuff that goes wrong?
Oh, there's several that come to mind. One, it just went to hell. I had it was when Hardy and Jesse and myself were fishing pound nets. And it was just a fishing mishap. But I just felt, whatever, you have that little inner voice.
Right.
I felt like an uneasiness about the day, and I was like, it's kind of rough out there, and I was still new to it, but I was like, I could do it.
Uh-huh.
I'm just going to go and do it. And we get out there, and the whole time I'm just like, something's going to happen here. I don't feel right, but, we go, we do it. First pound net, it was fine. We get to the second pound net. Stingray comes in a boat, busts through my boot. I got a barb stuck 1.5 inches in my foot, and it broke off in my foot. That was pretty bad. But
okay, so how do you get the barb out?
I think we finished pound netting.
Priorities.
Priorities here. We didn't make it to the third net, but we got finished with the second one, tied up the tunnel, and
did this hurt?
Oh yeah, for that first you're just in shock and adrenaline. You're like, stuck by a stingray barb, and I remember just looking at Hardy, and he can look in my eyes and be like, uh-oh, and then all of a sudden I was like, like just intense pain, and he realized that the barb was broken off, and you could kind of see it. It was this foot right here. It was kind of sticking just barely out of my boot, and so he was like, don't touch it. And hot water is apparently what you need for a stingray wound. And so Jesse and Hardy are scrambling to like get things done and let's get back in, and they had to cut my boot off and then just fillet my foot open to get the barb out. The doctor or whomever at the clinic did it.
I was wondering if Hardy did that.
If he did that, that would be, if he needed to do it, I'm sure he would have done it for me. However, I'm thankful he did not. He's a fisherman, not a doctor.
Right.
But no, and they just had to fillet my foot open and get the barb out. And of course, it's a barb, so it goes in, and the barbs are like that. So when you pull it out, it's quite painful. And with those things get left in the foot that can cause,
infection,
abscess. And 9 months later, I had a little bit of gangrene. I had to have my foot reopened, and they had to scrape my toe joint. But after that, it was fine. After that, once all the bacteria was out, it was easy healing. I'm a fast healer.
I'd say that's definitely a lousy fishing
That was a lousy
trip.
day. But, as far as, like, injuries, you're always going to have, minute injuries from a fish bone to get slapped in the head with a buoy or something like that. But weather-wise, that can be different. The most we really go out in early summer.
Do you ever get frightened out there with weather?
No. It gets sketchy. When you see lightning flash before you hear it, you're like, can we just go now? Let's go. Just cut the net. I'll cut it. Let's just go. But, he stays pretty in tune with the weather.
That's
I believe he is just like a human barometer. He knows things before, the people on the Weather Channel do. And so he doesn't really put us in danger. He's not totally money hungry. He's not crazy. You have to take risk, and you go out there, if it's blowing 35 miles an hour, we're not going to go set nets. We, early summer when the water's still warm and, you can set overnight for a little while still. We fish out in the bight back of Blair's, out of Blair's Channel here, rather than down there. We fish out here for mackerel. And it's a little bit rougher, where we fish down towards the north end, we're protected by the reef.
Okay.
So here's more open.
Exposed.
Yeah, you're within the inlet, a lot more current, heavier seas. A couple times we've gotten caught out there, a northeast wind, about, 15 to 25 is what you want to fish in, because wind moves fish. And it cools off the water a little bit, and so fish are running. And, we've been stuck out there before, where you have like 8 shots of 200 yards each. And, the bow of the boat's coming up like this, the bow's dipping down underneath the waves. And you have the net reel, thankfully, and it's just cranking as hard as it can. The anchor, was stuck, weighing down the bow. And that got kind of sketchy because it was like waves are breaking, the bow's going down. I'm like, cut the line, and so sometimes you gotta lose gear, we've lost a few anchors, but anchor life, no question. We have been out there, I guess it was maybe 2 years ago, we were mending the pow net. It's blazing ass hot, and it's that summertime possible water spout, storms. And we're sitting out there just, mending the net or whatever, and I look up and there's 3 water spouts.
Oh, geez.
One of them I can see the water coming off of it, and I'm like, it's probably a mile or, mile and a half, 2 miles away, and I'm just like, hey, boss, there's a water spout or 2 over there, and he just looks up and he's like, all right, let me know when it gets closer. And I'm just like, oh, are you serious? And he's just like, just don't look at it. Just keep doing your job. He's like, you'll know if it gets closer. And I'm like, okay. So in essence, I try not to be too much of a girl about it. I trust him. It's like when you're on an airplane, don't worry until the flight attendants start freaking out.
Right.
When he starts freaking out, then I freak out. But if he's cool and calm, I'm like, all right, he knows what he's doing.
Coastal Voices thanks the storytellers, the community oral historians, and Radio Hatteras for their support. And we thank you for joining us this evening. Good night.